Yeah.
Hello and welcome to all of you joining us on this Saturday in December. And I can't tell you how much I've received over the last week questions about this Hindu webinar that is looking really at the issue of Canada, how much Canada has changed in the last couple of years. Also, the questions over what does this mean for students and job seekers, really. Because Canada did represent one of the countries that Indians really, really did go to. Even, I think, in 2022, Indians were close to a quarter of the student applicants for Canadian designated learning institutions, or DLIs, that we speak about. But in the last few years, what we have seen is a real shrinking of the space for students as well as for job seekers, people looking to move to Canada, even though in real terms, there are still so many more that do get taken. But the idea is that the pathways are narrowing. This has really been because of three different trends, and I want to get to them in just a bit. But first, I'd like to welcome you to the Hindus webinar on which asks, will Canada welcome Indian students and job seekers as before? I'm Suhasini Heather. I'm the diplomatic editor of the Hindu. With me are two very special guests who are really not just experts in the field, but practitioners who work with both sides and see just what has happened in the last few years. Jayanti Ramakrishnan joins us. Thanks so much for coming on the Hindus webinar. Jayanti is in Chennai. She has a PhD in mechanical engineering from the US, but has worked for more than 10 years in the field of education as faculty and at Galvanize Global Education. And that's a firm. She heads the test prep and the admissions team. So they counsel students, they talk to them, they look at what are their options for undergraduate programs and postgraduate programs abroad. So thanks so much for joining us, Jayanti.
And thank you so much for having me here.
And also joining us from the US is Dr. Binod Khadria. Professor Khadria, or Binod, if I may call you that, is not just an author. He works in the field. He was formerly a professor of economics, education, and international migration at Jawaharlal Nehru University, JNU in India, but presently is the president of the think tank Global Research Forum on Diaspora and Transnationalism. Of course, a couple of years ago, in the Institute for the Study of International Migration at Georgetown University's Edmund Walsh School of Foreign Service, he was appointed as an affiliate fellow. And he is the Canada Excellence Research Chair in Migration and Integration at the Toronto Metropolitan University. So as you can tell, really, we do have experts who can talk to your problems in particular. Binod is also the co-editor of the World Migration Report of 2020. And as you know, this is an important look at the trends. If you look at the last few years, what are really the trends that are worrying both educators as well as students, particularly those going to Canada? The first is really the global trends that we have seen. There is a global trend against movement and mobility in one sense. Countries in the West in particular are more and more worried about growing numbers of migration. Whether it's illegal or legal migration, there seems to be a sentiment against it. And the election of right-wing parties in not just the United States that we have seen recently, but in so many countries of Europe is tied to that global trend. The second is the trends in Canada itself, because even in Canada, we've seen certain issues with an overpopulation from students, the inability of the institutions to provide facilities for these students, even something as basic as housing has become a scarcity in several Canadian universities. And we did see in the last year the Trudeau government move in particular to try and cap the numbers of students coming in, to try and curtail the numbers of job seekers coming in. One of the big blows was, for example, the shutting down of the SDS pathways for accelerated visas for students, which I think so many Indians were beneficiaries of. The second has been not for Indians alone. There was a specific pathway for Nigerian students that has also been closed. So we shouldn't feel that it's just about Indian students facing these problems. Students worldwide are facing them. But the third is in particular, and this is where a lot of the concerns that we get are really coming in, are the trends in India-Canada ties. India and Canada have always had some amount of tensions, particularly over the Khalistan issue, particularly over some of India's demands from Canada on investigations. But they have not ever reached the depths that they have reached in the past 1 year. Since September 2023, so we're really talking about this period of 1 year, when Prime Minister Trudeau came to India for the G20, we've seen a day-on-day decline, if I may say, in bilateral ties between the two countries. Mr. Trudeau, of course, came here to discuss the case of the killing of a Khalistani activist in Canada, something that he said India was responsible for, then said Indian agents were responsible for, said this in Parliament. We've seen both countries cut down severely the numbers of diplomats being sent to both sides. India certainly made Canada send back about 2/3 of its diplomats because they said they needed parity. Canada expelling some of India's diplomats, India doing the same as well. So that became another issue. It wasn't just the bilateral tensions, but also the number of diplomats just dealing with visas. That became another issue for the two. Since then, we've really seen not much moving in terms of bettering ties. Some have suggested that this is a political issue between the Modi government and the Trudeau government, and perhaps after elections in 2025, that we might see some kind of a shift. So here's what we are discussing at this webinar today. And we hope you will send in your questions, because that's what we're here really to do, is to try and answer the questions that you as readers, viewers, students, job seekers, and generally people connected with the world, as all our Hindu readers are, would really have for our experts today. So to start with, Binod, if I may, I wanted to get a sense from you, firstly, what really Canada represented to the average Indian student who was looking to go abroad. What was its USP? Why were so many students attracted? Even just 3 years ago, we saw, I think, close to 250,000 students apply. What was the real reason for that?
Thank you, Suhasini, and thank you for that very kind introduction. I'm glad to be here along with Jayanti, and this is an occasion that after my retirement from JNU to connect with students worldwide through this forum, which is an opportunity. And your question, your introduction is absolutely contextual, and that helps me in understanding and responding to this question, why Indian students, are attracted to Canada. I think this is the hallmark of Canada as a multicultural country, which is, as you said, with the kind of shifts that are happening around the world, which is a fresh air in Canada, to think that we can coexist in different languages, different cuisine, different cultures, and so on. That's, I think, a feel-good factor that is provided by the Canadian environment that the students
I think Professor Kadria seems to have internet issues right now. We'll try and come back to him. He's there actually in the United States right now. We've gotten him up early in the morning. So we will come back to him. But Jayanti, can I turn that question to you then? The idea of why so many Indian students were attracted to Canadian higher education. Professor Kadria is, of course, saying that it was the multiculturalism, the kind of environment they received at campuses there. That was one reason. What do you find?
So, yeah, what he was saying was completely true. The multicultural environment, many Indians already having settled there, that also was an attraction to the students because they know that there is an Indian community there. They would have that kind of a social life that they had in India. Um, in addition to that, I think it's the number of universities, the excellent universities, even though there are lesser number of universities over there as compared to other countries like the US. um, what we saw was that there were about three universities which were in the top QS ranking, and there are about another 10 to 15 universities in the top 100 in the world. So these universities, they provided quality education. There was always a lot of stress on the research that is being conducted by the students. So it was one of those attracting factors. The second, I would say, was the pathway to residency. After that, Canada had a very relaxed immigration program where you had a degree. They had a very transparent system as well. You had a certain number of points, you became eligible for PR. So the students who thought that they want to move out of India, want to have a better career and a better life in a Western country, it was one of the easy options to make. And I also think, with respect to students, it was the cost of the education. It was lesser than US, it's lesser than UK, and the proximity to US was also an attraction to many students. So I think these were some of the factors that attracted the students in the first place to go to Canada. And the variety of programs, up until now, you could get a master's, you could get a diploma, you could get a certificate program, and all their post graduation work permits, all of that was the same for everyone. So they did not discriminate at that point that if you had a certificate, you would get only some number of this, but if you had a higher degree. So I think all of those factors made it a very attractive option for the Indian students. I think
All
Dr.
right.
Gadria is back. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
welcome
sorry.
back. Welcome back. And I know we've got you out very early in the morning there in the
No, no.
US. So
Yeah,
you were talking about the kind of multicultural atmosphere, the sort of welcome that students received on Canadian campuses. Jayanti's added those two bits. Not just is it that there was a simple sort of way of getting to Canada. It was also the point system that got students feeling that they had some kind of a future in Canada as well after the permanent residency, the PR system that they could have benefited from. Do you think that dream, when you're speaking to people, do you think that dream has dimmed in the last few years, Binod?
marginally, I would say. I'm sorry for the hitch, the technical hitch that
No
took
worries.
me out, but I'm glad to be back. Yeah, I think so because you see, Suhasini and Jayanti, who are the stakeholders? What do we mean by Canada? I mean, Canada is not an abstract entity. We have to think in terms of the stakeholders, universities and colleges and institutions. In North America, whether it is United States or Canada, they thrive on the international students. Otherwise, they will just collapse. The economy of the educational institutions is dependent on foreign students, and as you have mentioned the figures, India has, I think last year it was 20%, but prior to that it was even 40%, and that has come down. So that is one thing. The other is employers. Employers are vying with each other to have the employees, highly skilled employees, at the same time, middle skilled and so on, nurses and so on, IT professionals. So I think who in Canada is a question that needs to be answered. And we are today debating this issue because it is the politics which has come in the middle. And it reminds me of the kind of situation when the trade wars were happening under the WTO regime, when the cross retaliation was taking place. So I think this is a unique case of cross retaliation, of trying to settle scores, and putting the students and the parents and the others, the institutions, at the receiving end, which I think is not going to last forever. It would certainly spring back, and with confidence. And I have been to Canada, as you have mentioned. I think
Okay. I think Binod's taking another pause, but Jayanti, we've already
now.
got some questions coming in.
Yeah,
Soham Bhattacharjee, and I don't know if you can read the question, but
yeah,
the
I can
question
read.
is the attraction to Canada just for a mainstream of jobs like IT or other such schemes related to scientific fields? Or is it for students like Soham says he is pursuing humanities topics like history? Do you have an answer for that, Jayanti?
Yeah. So, if you look at the skilled shortage list that the Canada IRCC has on their website, IT and engineering and sciences are the top of their list. Okay, because that is where they feel that there is a shortage in their skilled labor, and that means that they are actively looking for those kind of graduates who have graduated from the universities there. And if you have graduated from a Canadian university with those in those streams, it definitely helps your case. But having said that, it doesn't mean that if you are in a humanities field, you don't have scope there. In that case, what I would suggest is that you look for universities which are well ranked, and not try to go into some kind of a small college or something, because then that diminishes your chance for work permits and residency later, if that is your plan after graduation. So even though humanities is not on top of their skill shortage list right now, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have a scope there. But it definitely, I would say that you look for universities which are well ranked, where your program is well established. That way, even if you don't have job options in Canada after you graduate, you always have other countries that you can look at, like the US and UK and things like that. So I wouldn't say that you wouldn't have scope. It's just not in their top list right now. But definitely, if you do things by the book, if you go to a good university, if you have a good profile, the I wouldn't say that any program is a bad program to go to.
Right. Jayanti, and to that question I was asking, earlier, do you see amongst the students that are coming to you a certain dimming of hope when it comes to Canada because of all these new restrictions that we've been speaking about?
Yeah. So we have seen a dip in the numbers in this intake, that is for the fall 2025 intake. We do have a dip in the numbers for Canada. Specifically because we do have students who are still interested, but they want to keep another country as one more option. They don't want to put all their eggs in one basket and say, okay, I just want to go to Canada. Initially, we would get students who would upfront tell us that I want to go to Canada because I want to become get PR over there. But now we are seeing students who are aware of the aware of the issues that are going on, and are saying, okay, if I get into a good university, then yes, Canada is an option for me, but I want to keep my options open. So we have students this year applying to Canada, but we at the same time they're applying to one more other country as well. Yeah.
All right. If I could ask you, what really prompted the restrictions? Obviously, we know about the bilateral problems between India and Canada, but Canada was already moving in a certain direction in terms of trying to at least streamline the kind of students they were getting. Then there was this major housing issue that meant that Canadians needed to have take in less students. What do you, according to you, has really led to these restrictions by Canada, shutting down of SDS, shutting down of the NSC, the Nigeria Students Program, also in terms of putting caps, straightening the kind of restrictions for DLIs, designated learning institutes, even the kind of courses that you can do and get visas easily for is kind of changing. So, what, according to you, really prompted these restrictions?
Yeah, I think this is a very pertinent question. What prompted the restrictions? I think the canvas is very large. It's IT and top highly skilled professionals streams, but at the same time, the gig economy is also there, where you find that even hairdressing and other kind of jobs are attracting international students after they have completed their degrees there. So SDS was basically to expedite the student admissions and visas, being because they are connected with the term starting at a particular point in time. And I think COVID was one intervention where all the visa processing was suspended across the world, and that actually triggered this kind of a situation. And then NSC was basically for the student exchange programs. The DLI that came was that there should not be a fly-by-night kind of institutions which are trying to fleece the students and at the same time taking these universities for a ride. So those were considerations, and those were not like isolated cases. That has been happening in different countries. So when you ask me what triggered the restrictions, I think it was the politics which came in to it was a soft option to target the students and the parents, because it's a kind of a one-way street, and that's where the students are being used as a weapon, because they are a mouthpiece whereby the public opinion is going to be mobilized across the world and within India, resentment and things like that. So I think it's a bit of, I would go to the extent of saying, arm twisting, which is involved in this kind of a situation, which is unfortunate because it is short-sighted. In the long run, the industry and the institutions cannot afford to let the international students not come in, because the stakes are on both sides, because many returnees also are important for the countries of origin, where they contribute to the development of these countries. Not only, I'm not thinking of India, but medical cases or doctors and nurses. You see that they are going to the grassroots level development in Africa, or very poor countries. So one has to have that vision, and you find that many of these students are actually leading this kind of NGO kind of activities, which is not profit oriented or earning oriented, but there is a bit of idealism. And I think we cannot afford to kill the idealism that underlies the stream of education, whether it is in India or Canada or USA or England, you name it. I think that's the bond which would actually survive. And if we think that these students can be used as a weapon, then that's a foolhardy.
Well, certainly those are sort of very important words there, Binod, because the idea that there is some kind of political push behind these kind of restrictions, it's certainly important. Jayanti, when you look at the students that are coming to you, and as Binod said, there are certain kinds of courses that they are putting more restrictions on and others. What would you tell students about going to Canada? And of course, I do want to discuss a little bit about what the options are as well. But really specifically, what would you say to students going to Canada in terms of, and Soham asked that question as well, in terms of the courses that they're looking for? Should they be going undergraduate or postgraduate, for example? Should they be looking at vocational courses, or should they be looking really much more at pure arts and hoping to get some kind of future degree out of that? Where do you see that the balance on that?
So, what I think is that students should target courses that they really want to study. I don't think one of the reasons why all of these rules and regulations have come in now is because of the advantages that people have taken, in the past. Like we know of cases where they would sign up for a 1 year diploma program, which really does not need a diploma from abroad, but they would go for that diploma program in Canada and then go into the PR system. And so in the past there have been a lot of such cases where fields like, hospitality management, the general arts and sciences, there have been huge influx of international students. And now all of those students having finished a small 9-month course or a 1-year course, they are without jobs because that market is saturated right now. So that is the one big thing that has happened. And the other thing is, because generally we want to go into the big cities like, Vancouver or Toronto and things like that. The universities which did not have their campuses there, they tied up with some private college which had a campus in the big city. So then, the students would actually go enroll there. They would
Mhm.
still get the degree from the public college, but they would end up taking, 1 or 2 courses during the week. The rest of the time, they would be working off campus, making money. So all of this kind of, just snowballed into a situation where there were not enough jobs when people graduated, or there were also cases where students would pay the initial fee, go into a university, and once they went in there, attend the classes for a few days, then just drop out of school and go work off campus. So all of this has caused a lot of strain on the system. So what we would advise the students to do is, first of all, do your research properly. Look at the universities, look at the programs, make sure you apply to reputed universities, make sure you apply to programs which are, well taught and well established in the university. So that way, that the experienced faculty is there. You know that after you finish your degree, you will have the option of getting jobs, you will have the option of getting internships and so on. So that is something that we tell the students. For the particular fields, I would say engineering, medicine, IT, and finance. These are some of the top fields where there is a lot of shortage over there right now.
Mhm.
And those are the fields, if you are in that field, then yes, definitely you should keep Canada as one of your options, keeping in mind that you still don't compromise on the university that you go to. The fields which are lesser, this, these short programs, the diploma programs, the certificate programs, which were very popular among the Indian students, those are really being scrutinized now. So if you apply to those, then there is a chance of a higher visa refusal, because they are actually looking at your profile. And that is one of the reasons, with the SDS not being there, the scrutiny increases on your application. So that is something that I would suggest to the students, that do your research on the programs that you want to apply. Make sure you're applying to good universities, well established universities. Talk to the seniors from your college who have gone there, or connect with the faculty over there before you apply. All of those kind of options would help. And if you're going through a consultancy who's going to help you with the application process, then make sure that consultancy is reputed. Because one of the things that has been happening very commonly is these consultancies which are, trying to get students there and are helping students forge documents and things like that. So you want to make sure that if you're getting any external help, you're getting it from reputable sources.
Right. Binod, since you study this subject so closely, there's also the phenomenon, and I've been speaking to Canadian officials who are talking about a little bit of the issues from their point of view. They do want good students. They do want students to come there. They do want people to take, at least that's what they say, take advantage of their policies when it comes to permanent residencies and all the rest of that. However, they say one of the big issues is now what is called third country. Actually, they just call it simply visa fraud. But they talk about the idea that so many are applying to come to Canada, but actually trying to go to the United States. This is not something that is only theoretical, because what we have seen in the last few years is a number of Indians being caught crossing into Canada, then those being caught on the Canadian side, those being caught on the American side, being deported back to India. We now have cases of so many being deported. I think more than 100,000 last year. And the third we have, unfortunately, is these cases of those going over to Canada, trying to cross into the US through the land boundary in the middle of the cold, in this weather. In fact, just last week we heard about a case and actually freezing to death. So, according to you, how much does this visa fraud factor in as one of the reasons for the curtailment, if you like, in visas for Canadian students and job seekers?
Yeah, it's important at this point in time because these incidents are increasing, but they are not increasing only on the borders of US and Canada. They are happening across the world. If you go to Europe, for example, I mean that's a phenomenon that had started long ago, and there was a chain of routing whereby the fraudsters would go and follow and cross over through land routes, as you have mentioned, all the way from through Greece and so on. So that's a different issue altogether. But if you look at students, genuine students, then why are these countries vying for? We do have education fairs in South Asia and other countries of the global South, whereby the global North universities and countries they call it recruiting students. I mean, I think it's a Freudian slip that they call it recruiting students. They should have called enrolling students. But this is because at the back of their mind are future workers. Because if you look at the trends, then you would find, at least in the case of United States, you would find that 60 to 80% of the students don't come back. They just settle there and do work. And more than that, in diplomacy or in politics, if you look at them, they are the future ambassadors of the countries and their alma mater and so on. So that I think is a big issue whereby these countries are vying for each other. And now you find that there is talent war. Uh, Germany, for example, what has it done? It has H-1B visa was getting tougher in United States based on lottery system, luck system, rather than on merit. And so many of these students who post their graduation wanted to stay in the United States had a next door neighbor, Canada, where they got these offers, and in fact, Canada officially, formally offered them the jobs, calling them H-1B visa rejections cases. We will expedite
Mm.
them and give them, express entry and so on. So that is there, and you see suddenly that Chancellor of Germany and our Prime Minister Modi got into an agreement
Yes.
whereby the annual intake in Germany was jacked up from 20,000 per year to 90,000 per year at one go. That's because the population in Germany is declining, and so Germany is scouting around to have the highly skilled people from across the world. And this is happening not only in Europe, but it's also happening within Asia. For example, the Gulf countries are now changing their policies. Uh, at least three countries, Saudi Arabia, Emirates, UAE, and Qatar are very much looking forward to having highly skilled migrants from different countries, and India is one of their targets for recruiting. And I think the entry point has become shifted from direct professionals going for jobs to getting into education. Education has become a routing for foreign students and talents to come and become future workers. So that I think is something which is all interconnected. So I think it's a tiny fraction. The fraud cases of crossing over is, and that I think the border security can take care of that. Well, one need not change your visa policy for that reason. Visa policy is shrouded in secrecy because of this reason, that we consider that this is a symbol of our sovereignty, that even in
Mm.
international multilateral negotiations now under the GCM, Global Compact for Migration, with the SDGs coming in 2015, that's an issue that it has to be debated and opened up, rather than saying that I look after my visas and you look after your visas and we don't talk about it. So I think
Mm.
it is a kind of a false kind of pretense that the fraud cases are actually driving the situation.
Well, I mean, obviously, this is a very focused conversation we are having, but there's the larger geopolitics, and especially once Mr. Trump takes over in the United States, about the kind of restrictions there'll be. Very quickly, Jayanti, because I know our viewers are sending in questions. There was one that you were speaking about, really, on in talking about what kind of courses you should be doing. There was a specific question from Navneeta saying, is it better to go for postgraduate, particularly medical options in Canada versus undergraduate? Do you have a quick response to that?
No, I think either is okay. Postgraduate, definitely, I think the student themselves are a little more mature to go
Yes.
there and
Yes.
acclimatize themselves. Having said that, we have sent undergraduate students in the last 2 or 3 years, and they are doing well. They we have talked to them recently because we were concerned about how they're doing with all these changes, and they all said that they all have gone to good universities, so they said we don't have any issues, we are doing well. So I think whether you want to go to undergrad or postgraduate is a personal choice. There's no rule saying that you should only go for this or the. I think it all depends on what your course is. Of course, an undergraduate degree will cost you more. But having said that, we have observed that Canada is a little more liberal with the scholarships for the undergraduate students, in the case of international students especially, as opposed to they are with their masters students.
Oh,
So
interesting.
that may be a consideration that you can look at when you decide whether you want to go for your UG or your PG there. Yeah.
That's certainly interesting. And Jayanti, to this question about that we see, of the visa fraud and other sort of questions involved in there. What do you tell students? Do you evaluate the students who come for guidance to you about how genuinely they want to just go and study in Canada, or is that something that is difficult to do?
No, we do evaluate them, as in we have a lot of discussions with the counselors, spend time understanding the profile and discussing with them. So we do tell them, what are the options they have before they decide which country they want to go to. So what we have observed is that generally the students that we have counseled are genuine. They want to go there for getting a degree, so they tend to follow all the processes by the book. They don't try to and do any kind of wrongdoing during the process. One of the things that I think Canada also was very liberal with their visa process, I would say, because when they had the SDS, as long as you had a GIC, as long as you had you were able to pay the first year of your tuition fee, they didn't really care how you got about doing that. So whoever paid it for you, as long as it was paid, it was done. Whereas the other countries, if you look at, they have very tight policies. They want to look at your bank statements. In the case of students, they even who are students who are not employed, who are not working professionals, they want to look at parents' IT returns and so on. So they want to make sure that the cases are genuine to begin with. So yes, so when we counsel students, we do talk to them about all these things, making sure that they are aware of the process for every country. And even though Canada had all these relaxed rules in their SDS system, we still made sure that they did everything by the book and there was no fraud activity going on. So that I think is very important. Talking to the students, understanding, making sure that they have the right intentions before we help them out with the process.
All right. Question coming in, actually, it's a comment more from Manoj Das, who says there is too much of a cloud over the diplomatic sky between the two countries, India and Canada, and students and parents are concerned. And Manoj, honestly, this is the one question that we keep getting asked. So I'm going to put it to both of you. Binod, do you think that the diplomatic situation between India and Canada makes this right now? What would you tell students? Should they just pause in terms of applying to Canada this year? What should they do? Just wait for the government to change and hope that diplomatic ties improve?
Yeah, it's a very pertinent question. Yes, I know Manoj Das. He has asked this question. Yeah, very good. Actually, I think there are quite a few historians here also amongst the audience, and I could see that what future lies for history. And then the Sohan Bhattacharya also asking this question of brain
Mm.
drain and what lies back in India. How do I get an assurance that I will be employed in India, back in India? These are all the questions which are connected with what Manoj has just asked. And that, I think, is actually connected with the history between India Canada bilateral relations. And we go back into history and we're reminded of the Komagata Maru incident when, 275 or 74 Indian passengers, and mostly from Punjab, were denied docking at Vancouver. And for that only, in 2014, after 100 years, uh, Canada Post actually issued a postal stamp in memory of that. And 2016, Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau himself asked an apology in the Parliament for this historical kind of mistake, or they called it a mistake at that point in time. And that, I think, bonding is something which is very important behind the shrouding of this cloud, which coming in, which is completely opposite by the same prime minister. So I think there are avenues where one need to sit back and reflect into what lies in future. But of course, time is very valuable here. Losing a semester or losing a year, academic year, is very expensive. The opportunity cost is very high. And as Jayanti has said, put your eggs in different baskets. So when you are still, trying to get to Canada, you also, keep your plan B, plan C, so that you are not caught by surprise. And that, I think, is absolutely important in this world of uncertainty.
All right. Jayanti, when you're speaking to students, I'm sure they're asking you also about these clouds, as Manoj puts it, over the diplomatic skies. What do you say to them? I ask this particularly because in the last few days, we've also heard about rising crime in Canada, students getting targeted, even students being killed. And the question about whether Indians in particular are at a greater risk than they were before. What do you tell students when they express these worries?
So, I think to address the first part of the question, whether they should even apply, what we tell the students is that if you look at all the policies, that the changes that the Canadian government has put out in the last couple of years, and if you take out the political part of it completely, I think the way to look at it would be that they are trying to tighten certain protocols in their system, which they should have done long back. And many of the countries have already done this. For example, Australia has a very stringent process when they, give out visas, give out admits, and things like that. I think with Canada, they have done it at a very later stage when there was already a huge influx of international students, which had caused a lot of stress on the system. So, the policies that are coming out are actually good policies for students who want to get that genuine education, who want to get that degree from a well reputed university, who want to go and work there. Things like, making sure that you are going into a DLI, which is which has the proper infrastructure, which has the faculty to teach you, which can give you the research opportunities. Making sure that you go into a university like that is very important. Things like making sure that your visa papers are in order, that you don't just go there and then within a few months you drop off the system and go work somewhere else. So these are all tightenings, rules that have been in place by other countries like US and Australia, UK for a few years. I think with Canada, they just happened to do it one after the other right away. Along with the political situation, I think it's just magnified a lot. So we do tell parents and students who are concerned that as long as you are doing the process properly, as long as you are making sure, again, going to a proper university, not picking an institute or a private college or something like that, you should still be okay. With respect to the crime, what we always tell, and this is before our students leave India for the semesters, we always have a session with them where we give them a lot of pointers on how to stay in a foreign country, because for many of them this is their first visit abroad, where they're staying away from family and parents and all that. So we always tell them that don't go into areas which are known for crime. We actually give them good information on which country they are going. If they're going to US, for example, then that certain parts in the US are the crime rates are higher. So I think what we basically we tell all the students is that you are in a foreign country, you should follow the rules. You have to make sure that you don't do anything that you shouldn't be doing, things that you may have done back home, because that maybe there is going to be no repercussions for it. You shouldn't try and do that in a foreign country. So these are the general guidelines that we give the students when they are going over there. So of course, all this news that we hear about all the recent crime and everything is a little worrisome to the parents. But unless you know what exactly happened, and if you're in that situation, there's no way to sit here and give
And
pass
when
any
you
kind of.
talk when you talk about numbers which are in the hundreds of thousands, it's important to keep a look at what that statistic also means. Could I also ask, Jayanti, how much this changes the cost factor? In the last few weeks, and I've been asking students what they really worry about. They say because of the crime, uh, they also have to deal with the idea of trying to live closer to campus.
Closer to campus, yes. Yeah.
What does that do in terms of how much do you tell people to budget really for their housing when it comes to college there?
Yeah. So initially, Canada, they needed us to show only 10,000 Canadian dollars as your living expense, which was completely not true, because staying in a city like Toronto or Vancouver, you would never be able to, so that was really a big shocker for some students who, budgeted only that much. And only after going there, they realized that I'm not going to be able to make make do in this much, and then they ended up working off campus. And until now, you could work unlimited number of hours off campus, even if you're a full-time student. But recently they have said you can only work 24 hours off campus. So these kind of rules has shown that you have to budget much more, and especially depending on the place that you're going to, you have to make sure. So what we normally tell students is, in addition to the $20,600 that you are needed to show now in your visa process as your living expense for 1 year, we do ask them to keep some kind of a buffer, because you don't know what happens after going there. You may want to stay very close to campus, or sometimes even stay on campus if that options are available. So yes, it is important that you have slightly more than what the budget, what they actually tell you to have. So that's what we tell the students, that so the number that we give them would actually depend on which place they're going to and which university they are enrolled. Of course, if they're enrolled in a very good university which is not in one of the main cities, then the cost of living is going to be lesser, and the place is probably going to be safer as well. So then they can afford to live little farther, take public transport and things like that to go to the universities.
That's an important point. we see this question from Soham, and I was in fact going to just ask you about that, where he asks about which are the countries that are providing better and more affordable scholarships for Indians. But there's a larger question here. Earlier, Jayanti was speaking, for example, about the fact that COVID changed some of the policies. And I remember at a time when Australia had actually got the strictest restrictions because of COVID, not allowing students to come back, not allowing students to go there. It was Canada that was the beneficiary. So we're just talking a few years ago. When you look at the geopolitical landscape as well, what really do you think are the countries that perhaps may be able to take better opportunity, better advantage of these Indian students who are looking to go and who may find either that the Canadian visas are being curtailed or that they themselves want to go to other countries? Which are the big, the top 5, if you like, that you would say are now the trends for people to go to?
I would say right now the trend, the top 5 would be the US, of course, is there. Australia has become a very popular option in the last 1 or 2 years. Germany, and again because of the what Dr. Kandaria just talked about, the increase in the number of students that they have, and also that now they have more postgraduate programs and some undergraduate programs being taught in English,
English.
so that helps the students to know who don't know German to the level. I mean, they know it, to get by for their day-to-day needs, but may not be able to study in German. So Germany is definitely an option. UK is also very popular for certain programs, not particularly for the engineering programs, more so for business related, finance related. And we have also seen that Ireland is a very popular destination now, so much so that we have had students who have received admits within a couple of days after applying to the university. So these are, I would say, some of the most popular countries that our students are targeting these days.
All
China
right. So we're
also
saying,
has become, Jayanti and
yeah.
Suhasini, if I may, China has become a
Yeah,
destination country, and large number of medical students are actually
yeah, exactly. A
going to
large number of
China.
medical
So
students, yeah, to
Interesting, and
China.
that's likely to go up because now there is a an agreement between Delhi and Beijing on the LAC. The foreign ministers are meeting. Never has geopolitics had such a bearing. I can remember going to college abroad maybe 30 years ago, and I didn't even think about geopolitics as one of the reasons for applying. But do you want to tell us more about really which are the countries, according to you, when you study? Where are the trends leading in terms of students going out? Which are the countries that Soham, for example, is asking for that are more affordable?
yeah, I think you're right. The information availability of information has actually become much more than your time or my time, when we didn't know what is where, and of course the scope has also increased in terms of countries tapping students from other countries. And that's where I think USA, one can actually have other sources of supporting the financing of the education, because there are students who are working part-time, and provided research assistantship or student research or tutoring, and so on. So those are, see, in the first year, first term, it may be that you have to put in the money from your parents' pockets or take a loan, because Indian banks now, for last few years have been giving educational loans for study in India and study abroad and so on. So many students resort to that, and then they try to get the scholarship. So it is also possible that students can get the fellowships and scholarships once they land up there, and not only fellowships and scholarships, but supporting part-time work which is within the department, within the center, and within the campus. So those avenues are there. It's not like, it's a question of more or less. It's not like either or. But yes, to answer someone's question, I think higher education is free in Europe, most of the Western European countries, whereas it costs a bomb in USA or even Canada to some extent, or UK particularly, which I think keeps changing its visa policy for students. So that I think one has to look at this volatility of the visa issues, which actually triggered this webinar, is that it can just change overnight, whereas the
Right.
plans, educational plans, are have a long term nature. And I tend to jokingly say that the visa policies have no expiry date. We tend to buy goods and services by looking at the expiry date, how long it is going to serve me. But visa policy can change overnight and give you a shocker. And that's why one has to have safeguards, which are, as Jayanti said, that you have to have more than what is required. You have to have something more in your kitty, to for the rainy day, and your family support, your friends circles. And those are issues which are very important in a foreign country. And undergraduate and postgraduate, I think undergraduate students are much more vulnerable than postgraduate students. And that, I think, is something which is only mature students should go for undergraduate studies abroad. Because we are looking at numbers. The numbers do not matter. It is just one particular single student who matters to the parents. And if things go wrong, then you are at such a distance that you cannot reach immediately. And there are tragic stories that abound. So one has to learn from them and have to postpone that temptation of sending students at undergraduate or even school level. Now you find that
Yes.
if school level this is happening, but it's at a risk. It is certainly at a risk. There are pluses and minuses which one has to take into account.
Certainly. And also, you were mentioning some of these other countries. The old idea was that US, UK, and Canada had an advantage for Indian students because of the language. But more and more European countries like France and Germany and the Netherlands and Denmark are
Yeah.
actually making English an acceptable medium. So there's competition from that as well. We do have one question. It's not exactly pertinent to our conversation today, but Jayanti, do you want to have a crack at it? Ramesh asking, how do you select a proper bank or financial institutions for financial support? Is there particular ones for particular countries? Are there some? Should you apply, for example, to a Canadian bank if you're applying to a Canadian university?
No, I'm assuming he's asking about an educational loan, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So no, I think we have observed that while we have tie-ups with a few banks that help our students, many times the students come and say their parents have accounts, very long-standing accounts in certain local banks, and they give very good rates too. So I think what you need to do is find out what are the requirements that the bank is offering you, and then go and find out, because based on even the student's academics, or if the student is targeting the US based on their GRE score, for example, certain banks give very low rates, or they waive off conditions like having a collateral or co-borrower and things like that. So I think it is a very particular personal case, as in you have to look at your specific situation and go and talk to a couple of banks. Only then you will be able to get the idea. But as long as you are taking it from a nationalized bank which is well reputed and all that, it should be okay. Just at the end of the day, it just depends on what the bank is offering you. Nowadays there are also these lot of these separate institutions wherein they offer you a loan and you don't have to pay it back until you have graduated and started working. So those kind of options are also there these days. So you have to talk to a person and find out what is going to work for your particular case. It would also depend on which university you have got and admit, the ranking and the reputation of that university, what is your personal financial situation and things like that.
All right. We just got another question in from Shashwat asking, what about combination courses? This is something I have to ask, even though I know it's, again, not pertinent to Canada, and maybe both of you could give me something on it. Is the idea of, sort of cross courses that work on, say, psychology and philosophy or international relations and foreign policy or journalism, that sort of thing. Do you think that is becoming much more of a trend, Jayanti?
Yeah, definitely, especially students targeting the US.
Mm.
We have often found that they, pick a major and a minor in a related field. And especially in most of the universities which have these big campuses, the entire different schools which offer each of these programs are all housed in the same campus. So it becomes easy for a student to, go in and enroll for engineering major, but also probably do a minor in a related field or something of, not even related but just of their interest. So this has become a very common trend in the last, I would say, 3 or 4 years. If they are able to financially afford it, then definitely it helps them. It also helps them, in showing to the job market that you are more adaptable, you are able to work multitask and do different courses, and you are able to highlight that in your profile. So it definitely has become a very popular trend in the last few years,
It
Right.
has
and
Well,
most
just
of
become,
the
and
universities
if
offer this kind of
I
options.
may
so,
add, I think India's new policy of education has actually taken note of this, that these
Yeah,
flexible mixing of courses should also
correct, correct.
happen within India. It takes time, of course, but the trend is very important. And you can offer physics with music, or
Yes.
Sanskrit with biology. So I think that is a holistic development of a personality, and students perhaps this is something which is one would
sure.
look forward.
It's an interesting and important trend.
Yes.
We've had such a great response to this particular webinar, so I'm sure we'll be inviting you both on again. I think on just the main site, we're already looking at nearly 8,000 viewers and readers coming in. But I do need to wrap this up at this point, so I'm going to come to each of you with just a basic question. When students are applying for Canada, because this is what we're discussing today, at this for the next year, what are some of the things you should keep in mind? Binod, do you want to go first?
Yes, I would be, both practical and philosophical about it. Practical in the sense, and these have been mentioned already, be prepared for the eventualities. And for that, you have to save money. Don't spend all your money. You should have a fund. So I would say 3F: funds, family, and friends. That they are your actually something saving grace that would have, and always keep plan A, plan B, plan C. Second thing, I would say work hard, and time is valuable. So you have to work. I used to tell my students work 26 hours a day, and they would say, sir, there are only 24 hours. I said, yes, like weather, it should make you feels like working 26 hours. And if you do that, you will finish your degree within time. The quality would be much higher, much better, if you are intensively doing your studies and your work and everything. So that's time is valuable. And third is idealize. Don't forget to dream. I think Suhasini mentioned in the beginning about the dream big. If you dream big, then even if you achieve 30% or 40% of that dream, that itself is large enough. And think about not only yourself, but think of others, think of your country, think of other countries, think of the globe. We are now in climate change. We cannot say that I will think of myself and not worry about my neighbor. That does not happen. You have seen the pollution in Delhi happening, and it affects everybody. So that's
Mhm.
where I would say that the three things are important.
Very nicely put. Jayanti, as students look for the next year, well, spring session is already just right upon us, but for the next fall term, maybe, are applying to Canada in this time when there's such uncertainty, so many new restrictions from Canada, pulling back of the STS exchange system, as well as the diplomatic dark clouds, as somebody on the webinar had put it. What would you suggest to them as what they should keep in mind when applying?
Yeah. So what I would suggest is, like I already said, make sure that you are looking only at good reputed universities. Don't try to fall into this that, oh, if I go here, I'll finish my degree in 9 months and then I'll be all set for my PR kind of a thing. Make sure that your intentions are clear, your aspirations are clear, and you make sure that you go to good universities, good programs, do your research, apply ahead of time. If you have decided that you're going to Canada, then I think with the SDS gone and all these new changes that are coming, like, direct recent just pointed out, something can change overnight. So you want to be ahead of the game and, applying on time, making sure if you have finished your application, you've got your admit, then you move on to the next step of the visa process and start it off right away. um, Specifically for the visa, I would say that even though SDS is not there, if you make sure that you right now there is no requirement that you have to have a GIC, you have to have paid your tuition fee in full before you go there. You don't need to have a specific IELTS score. What I would say is, still assume that SDS is there, make sure you follow those conditions, because then that way the visa officer knows that you are a genuine student, you have the ability to pay, you have a good profile, which shows from your academic profile as well as your good IELTS score. So all of that will reduce your chances of your visa getting refused. And of course, once you go there, then make sure that you don't get distracted by the other things, focus on your studies, don't waste time on other things, and just make sure that you are able to get the degree. Because recently we talked to our students who graduated last year, and they've all found jobs and they're very happy. So if you are, on your path, it does, all of these things will not affect you much.
All right. Thank you so much, Jayanti Ramakrishna and Binod Kadria, for joining us for this very, very informative session for students, particularly those applying to Canada. Some of the big takeaways that I can see from all that you have said is, don't be disheartened, keep your dreams alive, work hard towards it, be in time, be very particular about the kind of universities you're applying to. Don't compromise on the quality either of universities or faculty or of the consultancies that you go to. Consider your own age and maturity. And this is different for every student, especially going to a country as far away, perhaps, as Canada. In terms of the geopolitics, in terms of the diplomatic clouds, it is possibly not possible to really know where this one is going. The only thing you can do is prepare well, prepare in advance, and as Binod sir said, really have your fun together. Make sure that you have planned for contingencies, ensure that you do have family and friends that you can fall back on. But most importantly, really dream big. And I'm going to have to let everyone go at this point, but I'd just like to wish everyone who has joined us today, thank you very much from the team at The Hindu, and also for those of you who are applying or are thinking of applying, all the best for your future. From the team here, thanks for watching us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bon voyage.